Good morning, everyone. I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about two specific topics that I've been heavily focused on over the last few months, and I'll explain why. So the first topic I want to talk about is called what I'm calling the automation mindset. Um, and to think about this, the idea is very simple. Essentially, when we perform a task that needs to be done, whether it's regarding to business or whether it's regarding to IT or whether it's regarding to personal life, anything like that, if there's a way to abstract that task, to remove the specifics and put them into like a subtask of sorts, um, and then build a routine around performing a general task that calls the subtask. And then again, I'm going to go into an example of this so you understand what I'm talking about. But the goal is to like minimize the amount of effort you're spending on a specific task. Sometimes it could be you need to do a specific thing 1,000 times. You need to iterate over. It could be one task you have to perform, but the data set you have to iterate over is a lot. Or it could be you have to do one task with one item, and you have to do it many times over the course of your career. In both of those instances, you can automate them out. They're just done in different ways. So like the second example of having a single item to work with, like a single data set, you just have to redo the same task over and over and over again. That's very simple to automate. You just have to build a script to perform that task and then run it as necessary. But the first one, it doesn't seem as clear. If you have a process or multiple processes that you may be doing once or you may be doing more than once, you don't know, but you do have to do it many times over across a larger data set. The idea is to abstract out what that data set is so that you can feed it in and then have the automation take care of the rest. So basically save yourself time. It's think of it as like automating 50% of it or 30% of it or 60% of it instead of automating 100% of it. Where you still have to feed manual data. So let me give you an example, and you'll understand what I'm talking about, hopefully. If you think about a lock, let's say you have the responsibility, you're the neighborhood watch, and you have the responsibility of going through every single house that people are away on. Let's say there's about 30 houses in the neighborhood, and you got to go to every single one of them and check to make sure that they're all still safe, there's nobody inside, and so on and so forth. So in order to do this, you have to have a ring of keys that are extremely big, or a list of key codes to get into each house. And every house is different. And no matter what, some of them are locks with keys, some of them are key codes, some of them have an alarm system, so on and so forth. But there's a nice number of houses that have all or some of those things. Now, what you'll want to do is abstract the concept of what it is that you're doing. So the concept is we need to get into the house. We need to unlock the door. And what you'll end up doing to automate this or to make your life simpler is to build a automation of sorts that says unlock this door with a necessary key. And then the part you're abstracting is whether it's the key, whether it's the key pin, whether it's the code, or whatever, any of that stuff. And then on the front end, so to speak, what will happen is the automation will prompt you, what's the code? Is there a key? What's the code to the alarm? And you'll have the same repetitive, consistent questions that ask every time. And then the different procedures, the different steps that need to happen to go through each one of the houses will be taken care of by the automation. So you're building like a front end or like a proxy or a mask or a filter where it's giving you the same experience no matter what house you go to. And if you put in a pin code and the workflow, and you have to put a star in afterwards in some houses and a pound in the other or nothing, whatever, the automation will figure that out because you would have built in those conditions into the automation. You've abstracted the pin code and the way to, and you've automated the method of entry so that you just put in the code every single time and it's the same process every time. That way, making yourself more efficient. You don't have to remember, oh, this house is this house is that, this house is that. What do I do here? The automation and the conditions you've built in will do it for you. And that's basically automating like 50% of the process, making your life simpler to go through each house. So that's an example of what it is that we're talking about. And the idea applies everywhere. So let's go technical for a second and talk about scripting, or even coding software or anything like that. If you have a function that needs to be called that's performing a task and you need it to happen in multiple areas throughout the script or software that you're writing, you would create a function for it, like encrypt password or check password. And you need to make sure it happens when they're setting a password, when they're changing a password, when they're logging in. So each of those areas are going to call the same function that you've abstracted out to encrypt the password. So that's an example of how it works, like script functions that occur at the very top of the software or script that you call into the code when necessary, mean that you only have to change it. If you're updating that function, you only have to change it in one area. If there's a mistake, you only have to change it in one area. It's the reason why variables get used instead of hard coding values. It makes it more dynamic, it makes it simpler, and if there's a mistake, you go fix it in one area instead of multiple other areas. So that's the idea of the automation mindset. Now, the last thing I want to say is like that happens in business processes as well. Like that idea of abstracting out to build a business plan so that people can fill in the blanks. Again, humans have the ability to make decisions, right? They're a little bit better than AI. No, I'm joking. The human intelligence has a lot of depth to it. You have the ability to make decisions as long as you're given the tools to make those decisions. So we don't want to build a process that's very strict and rigid because we want to make sure that there's room for when an unknown situation is accounted for. But we do want to explain context, and we do want to have abstract processes so that the goal is that the employees running those processes understand the spirit of the law, in terms of like they understand the spirit of what it is you're trying to accomplish, and they'll work using their own judgment and intelligence. They'll work towards that goal, towards that process, because they'll understand what the end goal is. So when you build your business processes, you don't want to have them so rigid where there's no room to move if you run into a situation you don't expect. Otherwise, what you end up doing is you end up causing a queue up of questions. If it's extremely rigid, what will happen is the employee will run into a situation where it's not covered by the policy. And now, because they're running a how-to instead of a policy, what's going to happen is they're going to go, oh, I don't know what to do. And then they're going to come to you and say, hey, what do I do with this situation? And then you're basically making sure all questions come back to you, which causes a blockage in terms of A, you getting your own work done, and B, what happens if you go away? Are they going to be able to operate? So you want to abstract and build your business processes out in a way that's repeatable, in a way that the decisions can be made, and for the employees to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. And that way, they'll be able to complete those policies and meet those policies, even in situations where you're not available or it's not clearly understood. So that's the automation mindset. The next thing I want to talk about is the defensive mindset. It goes hand in hand. It's not really something that is commonly referred to. Almost everyone nowadays is talking about security, cybersecurity, security tools, cybersecurity, security awareness training, all those kinds of things. I want to go back to basics, the defensive mindset. For those of you watching who are technicians, or for those of you who are not technicians but do hobbies where you're building something or fixing stuff at home, or even in a situation where you're heavily invested in building on your business, how many times have you run into the situation where you've taken an action and the end result was worse than where you were before? Because it's easiest to see this in IT, so I'm just going to focus on that for a second, but it's the same thing applies to everyone else. There are often times where, in an effort for you to fix something, you have to break it a little bit. And the end result is going to be, well, did I break it and make it better? I broke it, I fixed everything that was broken underneath, and then I put it back together, and now it's all working. Or did I break it and now it's left in worse pieces than it was before, because I don't know how to put it back together from what I broke? All right, maybe you fixed one issue and you caused 3 more. Right? Or maybe you changed something in the business, fixing one area, but then the rest broke too. So this comes back down to what I'm coining as the defensive mindset. I haven't heard other people mention it as much. But the defensive mindset is very simple. It's just about performing a risk assessment, a risk analysis. And this is not a technical or security thing. This is a business thing. This is something that everyone does, even outside of business in your personal life. Oh, I need to drive, to a very far away place. How long can I go before I need to get gas? How much does gas cost? Does gas cost more here, or does it cost more in the middle? Or can I get all the way to cheaper gas when I get there and then fill up gas, right? This is a risk assessment. How far can I do something before I end up in a situation that's worse off than I am now? So that risk assessment is basically something that we should be doing on an ongoing basis in every action that we take. It needs to be performed when doing a single action. As a technician, before I fix something, I need to verify if what I'm going to do, if I need to delete a registry key, or I need to modify a value, am I going to make sure that what I'm changing isn't going to break something more? If I'm deleting something from the disk, right? Am I going to need that data again? So these are things that you should be considering. And the goal is, like, people are like, oh, well, if you work at it long enough, you'll figure out the things you can't do. No, that's not true, or at least it's not necessarily the safest way of doing it. What you end up doing is you'll end up building an inherent or instinctual risk assessment you'll be doing every time. And you'll learn tricks like, hey, maybe I should copy that file first. Oh, maybe I should rename it instead of deleting it. Or let's export the registry key, right? These are tricks that you learn as you have experience as a technician that are basically they're just giving you a way out. They're mitigating the risk that you're creating. So in simple terms, the defensive mindset is a situation where you could be doing more damage than, you're going from the known to the unknown, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you assess the worst case scenario. What is it that I'm going to do? What can happen from what I'm doing? And how bad will that damage be? And in that worst case scenario, you consider, what are ways I can prevent this worst case scenario from happening? So how can I make it less risky, essentially? And then when you get to that point and you have minimized the amount of risk as much as you can, you then go and say, now, if this minimized risk still happens, how can I recover from it? What are the ways I can mitigate from this risk? Okay, this is not technical. It's not security. This occurs in everything that you do. Am I comparing prices? Am I buying this over that? Am I going to drive to this area? Am I going to go through this area? Am I going to arrange my trip to 6 different stops in a very specific way to save the most amount of gas, right? This is all just regular things that we perform on a daily basis that we're just not aware of that we're doing, right? We're not calling it out as a risk assessment, but that's what it is. And we do that in business too. Like, should I make this investment? Should I make this call? Should I buy this over that? So it's the same exact process that we're performing. And we just have to make sure we hone in on that and use it way more often, and pay attention to it and try to mitigate those risks as much as possible. And that is the defensive mindset. Now, the reason why I want to talk about it is because let's apply this to the automation mindset. Let's apply this to the technical mindset. Well, I actually already spoke about a technical perspective, right? When we're working on something that we're fixing, we want to make sure that whatever we fix, we don't break something more. So make sure you're taking backups, you're taking exports, you're renaming, you're copying, you're not deleting, right? Don't do any lasting damage until you know exactly what the issue is 100%. If you want to hear more about the specifics of that, you can go onto the MSP Geek YouTube channel. And then inside of that channel, there's a troubleshooting webinar that goes more into depth on technical side on how to troubleshoot and how to think like that, how to do this scientific process for troubleshooting. But I want to switch over and talk about the automation mindset again. I want to talk about how we apply the defensive mindset to the automation mindset. The defensive mindset is, like we discussed, is the risk assessments. Now, what were to happen if we weren't doing a risk assessment and we were to do something with the automation mindset? We're like, oh, we have this process we need to perform. We need to change a password. We need to change everyone's password because of some potential security risk or something like that. For whatever unknown reason, we need to change everyone's password. And suddenly you write a script to change everyone's password, and you end up renaming every single user to something unrecognizable. And now you have no idea which user was which name or how to fix it because there was a bug in your script or something like that happened, and you just ended up renaming everybody to either the same name or something like that's very damaging. So now the question becomes like, what could you have done? Like, what is the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario is not that. The worst case scenario, honestly, is that you deleted the account and lost everything for that user, right? Now, worst case scenario, if you're talking about a local Active Directory, worst case scenario is that recycle bin's not enabled and you've deleted all the users, and now you're in a situation where those users don't exist. Everything less than that is easy to handle once you think of that. So let's say we say the worst case scenario is my script is broken and I deleted everything. How can I minimize the risk? What's the risk? Is that I'm doing it to a large number of users and I don't know what's going to happen. So to minimize that risk, we take the automation mindset and we decrease our iterative data set, right? The number of users that we're going to be messing with is going to go down from 100 or from 50 or 20 to one user. You're going to build out the exact automation script, the exact process, but you're going to focus it initially on step one on a single user. Okay, that immediately decreases the risk from every single user in the organization to just a single user. And if you deleted one user, okay, that's not so bad. It's still bad for that user, and you're still embarrassed, and you still have to deal with the fallout of that. But at least the amount of risk there is significantly less than having to delete all the users in the organization and having to deal with that. So you want to decrease the iterative data set you're working on down to a single record using the exact same structure in your script. It's not like, oh, well, I've done it manually with one user, so now I can automate it with rest. No, you want to perform the automation on a single user, on a single area, on a single system. You want to minimize the amount of damages that can come out, the what's that risk. And then you say, okay, let's run it. And let's say I delete the user, or let's say, yeah, let's focus on deleting the user in Active Directory. Now we go, okay, how can we recover from that situation if the user is deleted? Well, that's easy. I can turn on AD recycle bin in this situation. There's always going to be a way or method or mechanism for you to figure out what can happen. Or alternatively, you can go, well, there's more than just one issue that can happen. So I'm going to turn on the AD recycle bin, and I'm going to grab all the details of the users that I need that I'm going to be messing with right now from the system, and I'll save it into a file. And then I'll go ahead and run my user on a single user. If it works on a single user, great. If it doesn't work, I can recover. I can recover the user account. I can rename the user back, whatever it is. And then you can move forward from 1 to 10 and from 10 to 100. And once you have enough data indicating your automations are working after thorough testing, you then go ahead and unleash it on the rest of the world. So that's the defensive mindset. Now, I'm going to expand this defensive mindset just a little bit further. Let's say that we have that defensive mindset and we're checking our emails. Let's say we've established, yeah, we need to be careful about the things that we're doing. We need to make sure we consider each outcome of every action, and we go forward. So you get an email from someone and you're responding to them, and you go to the next email and you respond to that one, you go to the next email and you don't recognize it. Should you click on things or open attachments? And obviously everyone's going to say, no, that's obvious, right? Security awareness training. I'm not talking about security awareness training. I'm talking about the defensive mindset. What is the worst case outcome that can happen from you opening a file from a user, from a user you don't recognize? What is the worst case scenario from you opening a link or trying to sign in if you're not expecting something? Worst case scenario, it's something that you need, and they send it again, or they reach out to you through other methods. Worst case scenario, if you open it. Worst case scenario, if you don't open it, right? What'll happen? Nothing. Bottom line is, if they need to reach out to you, they'll reach out to you. They have your phone number. They probably have your phone number. They can send you a snail mail. They can find other ways through official channels to actually reach out to you for real if you're not answering them. And then if you open the actual attachment or link, the worst case scenario is that it could potentially be a phishing scam or something like that, right? It's like you're not going to eat something off the ground if you don't know where it came from, right? Or you're not going to eat something off the ground at all. You're not going to eat food that's open if you don't know where it came from. So that kind of thinking goes like underneath the security awareness training. Everyone needs to be secure. Like the security awareness training, of course, is important, but it's kind of like the Band-Aid here. The problem is that people are not thinking in the defensive mindset. They're not realizing how dangerous their actions can be behind the computer screen. So that's the thing. That's what I want to focus on. The automation mindset is number one, should improve your efficiency. It should give you a different way of thinking. You should start literally thinking in abstract. What are ways I can abstract this out? And you may have to like shift or pivot your perception a little bit to say, okay, these things I can manually enter, and the rest I can automate. I've been working with Roost a lot. My first video was a Roost 101. And one of the most common things that we get both at Roost and I hear outside of that is that I don't know how to automate something that cannot be automated. Well, the idea of the automation mindset is to take parts of that process or whatever that is and automate as much of it as you can. Because even automating 30% of it means that you've saved 30% of the work you need to do. And it may take a long time for you to create that automation or that form to collect that data that you need to power the rest of the automation. But once you do, you're going to make that back. And the more you start looking at automating stuff, what will happen is that when you have 30% of the process automated, the next time you run it, or the next 10 times you run it, or 100 times later after you run it, you'll be like, wait a second, there's something new here that I can do to automate this another 10%. And the end goal, it's a journey. The end goal is to get to 100% automation, or at least 90% automation. But just because you can't get there immediately doesn't mean that you just don't automate, because that doesn't make any sense. And then the defensive mindset, literally, it's just summed up: be careful. Everyone already is aware of being careful. They don't talk to strangers. They don't take candy from strangers. You're careful about your trips. You make sure your car is packed properly before you go on a long drive. You have all the provisions you need for camping. Like, this is all stuff everybody does anyways. Just be careful. That's it. Anyways, thanks for watching. This turned into a much longer rant than I wanted. But yeah, leave your comments below and like and subscribe.